Do the Liberals not understand that this is a stain on our country, a stain on every one of us in this House? Why are the Liberals tolerating forced sterilization of Indigenous women?
What can you say about a portion of the world led by people that despise children, or at the very least have no experience with them? Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Oedipus complex-riddled French President Emmanuel Macron are just a few of the childless world leaders egging on the United Nations program of sterilization.
Well, you have to remember my grandmother was coerced into signing an X for me to become sterilized, but she didn't understand what sterilization or tubercle ligation was. All she knew, I believe, is that her food supplements were being threatened to being taken away from her if she did not consent.
It is a moment 20 years in the making. Dozens of indigenous Peruvian women arrived to give testimony to national prosecutors, the beginnings of a possible new criminal case on their behalf. In the 1990s, during the regime of strongman President Alberto Fujimori, they were sterilized without their consent by doctors working for the Peruvian Health Service.
Sterilization has been among us long before most of us were even born. In 1936, the Nazis defended their forced sterilization program by propagandizing the United States as an ally in the eugenics movement. But the atrocities of World War II would rapidly alter the United States' collective attitude toward eugenics. In 1970, the Tricky Dick Nixon administration overwhelmingly increased Medicaid-funded sterilization of low-income Americans. These sterilizations were voluntary as a matter of policy, but anecdotal evidence later revealed that they were often involuntary as a matter of practice. Patients were given misleading information regarding the procedures they would endure. And as sterilization became the norm, in 1979, according to a survey conducted by Family Planning Perspectives, 70% of American hospitals failed to adequately follow U.S. Department of Health and Human Services guidelines regarding informed consent in cases of sterilization. It wasn't until 1981 that Oregon performed the last legal forced sterilization in U.S. history, and we would all be fools to think it ended there. The globalists increased their efforts worldwide. As the New American writes, the United Nations Population Fund is under heavy fire after an investigation by the Population Research Institute that showed yet again that the UN is working with the communist dictatorship ruling mainland China to enforce its barbaric one-child policy, complete with forced abortions, involuntary sterilization, kidnapping of illegal children, and other brutal tactics. The evidence of UN complicity in the atrocious human rights violations is undeniable, according to PRI President Stephen Mosher.
By the mid-1980s, according to Chinese government statistics, birth control surgeries, abortions, sterilizations, and IUD insertions were averaging more than 30 million a year. Many, if not most, of these procedures were performed on women who submitted only under duress. We now see child labor on the rise in China. Why do we see child labor on the rise in China? Because there are labor shortages now in Guangdong province, where the one-child policy began to be enforced in the early 80s. And besides bringing in workers from other provinces under abysmal conditions, they are now bringing in children into the workforce, taking them out of schools, or converting schools actually into factories.
We know what works. Human capital, agricultural sector, taking advantage of innovation, whether that's new seeds, new vaccines, or the digital platform. It's clear if we make the right investments to help these countries, they can get virtually all their citizens out of extreme poverty.
Indian doctors blame the Gates campaign for a devastating vaccine-strain polio epidemic that paralyzed 496,000 children between the years 2000 and 2017. In 2017, the World Health Organization reluctantly admitted that the global polio explosion is predominantly vaccine-strain, meaning it is coming from Gates' vaccine program. We can thank the childless buffoons currently leading the planet into their own private hell and our own acquiescence to their lunacy for the typhoon of anger the remaining generations will unleash on all of us. John Bound.